Devotees, thank you for joining the Shastra study class. Today we are very fortunate to have with us His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj. Maharaj is a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada and a senior sannyasi, GBC, member of ISKCON, and he has translated more than 60 literatures of Goswamis and other acharyas. So today, instead of going through the regular verses, Maharaj will be giving us an overview of the whole first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we are going to hear about the overview of the whole first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yes, sir. Hello? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I just talked and now Mata is going to talk. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Right. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Vishnu Padamahanga Maharaj Acharya Sri AC Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Namaskar Hardas Thakur ki jai, Prem Sagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Shri Radha Krishna Govardhan Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadip Dham ki jai,
Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Anandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to the Seven devotees. All glories to the Seven devotees. All glories to the Seven devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Oh, what's that? Duplicate. What happened to it? Okay, it's fine. Okay. Okay. So, the first canto of the Bhagavatam is not spoken by Sukadev Goswami. He starts speaking in the second canto, and then he concludes partway through the 12th canto. Nevertheless, we consider the first canto also to be part of the Bhagavatam, even though it wasn't spoken by Sukadev Goswami, and the last part also. So, the first canto is more or less an introduction to the work. The first verse itself is usually given a big commentary by most of the acharyas, because it represents the conclusion of the Bhagavatam, and also within it contains a lot of hidden meanings. So both Jiva Goswami and Vishnu Chakravarti Goswami give that first verse, I think, about 5 different meanings, depending on general concept of God, and then Krishna, and then Radha and Krishna, and then Bhakti, etc. So that verse itself has many meanings to it, but I won't cover that here. So I'll go on to discuss the other things that happen in the first canto of Bhagavatam. One topic is the 6 questions that the sages ask, and in response, then the responses are given in different places. Some places within the first canto itself, and some places in other parts of the Bhagavatam. But first question is, what's the most beneficial goal for humanity? In other words, what should people do? And the answer is, the highest goal is prema. Not, in other words, we don't want svarga, we don't want liberation, we want spiritual world with prema. And this prema brings the Supreme Lord under control. So the goal is prema, nothing else. What is the essence of scriptures of which the intellect is pleased? The supreme dharma for all human beings is that by which prema bhakti, the Lord, arises. So in other words, the goal is prema, and how do we get there? So that's the main subject of the scriptures. What is our sadhana to get to prema? So it is bhakti, which is not caused by anything other than itself, cannot be obstructed, and which satisfies the mind completely. So in other words, there is a question about prayojan of the goal, another question about abhideya, the process. What is the purpose of Krishna's appearance from Devaki, and the purpose of other avatars? Why does the Lord come into the material world? The Lord, creator of the universe, absorbing himself in the forms of various Leela avatars as David, as animals and humans, protects the world through his role as the controller of Sattva Guna. So he protects the people of this world. Okay, protection itself has a wide variety of meanings, ultimately to nourish bhakti. What are the pastimes of Krishna? So this is described in 10th canto mostly. What are the avatars? So in the first canto, chapter 3, we get a long list, and in the second canto, we got another list. And then throughout the various cantos, we have a description of some of the important avatars like Varaha and Vamana and Kurma and Matsya, etc. And then the 6th question is, Who is the shelter of Dharma now that Krishna has departed? And the answer is, it is Bhagavatam. So here's the famous verse, though Krishna left Dwarka, arrived at Prabhas, and then disappeared along with his 6 great qualities. This Purana, another form of the sun, has now risen in Kali Yuga for those who have lost their knowledge. So in place of Krishna, we have Bhagavatam. So in other words, the various questions were asked about Abhideya, Prayojana, etc. And now we get to Pramana. What is the Pramana for everything? It is Bhagavatam. So, in other words, the Bhagavatam will deal with all these subject matters, Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana, in a most conclusive manner. So, the first canto it appears to have many different topics, because we see the story of Narada Muni, and we see the story of Parikshit, how he gets cursed, etc. And the story, of course, is inspecting the kingdom and chastising personification of Kali. And then we see there's descriptions of Kunti's prayers and things like this. All so many different topics. It looks a little bit confusing. What is the ultimate goal? But if we look closely, we see it's actually giving a background to how Sukadev began to speak the Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. So that's basically what it's doing. And Sukadev gets it from Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva gets it from Narada Muni. So therefore all these Narada Muni, Vyasadeva, Parikshit are all described here. And then of course related to that is the whole battle of Kurukshetra, and we have Bhishma Dev and things described also, because that's all related to ultimately to the birth of Parikshit. So, the second chapter is quite important, because here we have a discussion of Bhakti, Prema, and Krishna involved. Okay? So, what is the cause of Bhakti? This is an important subject, because actually the cause of Bhakti is not material. So, does not arise by material punyas and whatever like that. They may be favorable, but they're not the ultimate cause. So whenever, like in Bhagavad Gita, it talks about one who has got punya, then he develops bhakti. So then people say, oh, so we have to develop sattva gun first and whatever. But not true in the absolute sense. Bhakti does not depend upon the gunas of material nature and punyas. So the ultimate cause is sadhu sangha. O Brahmanas, attraction for topics concerning Krishna will arise by service to the great devotees, followed by faith, by surrender to the feet of the pure Guru, and by desire to hear. Yeah, so first there is service to great devotees, and we have faith. And then we have surrender to a Guru, and then we hear. So these are some of the steps in bhakti. Then we get anartha nivritti. We do service and hearing, etc. And then the anarthas are dissipated, and as they disappear more and more, gradually one comes to the stage of nishtha, or steadiness. As the impediments to bhakti become generally destroyed by constant service to the devotees in Bhagavatam, the stage of nishtha bhakti to Bhagavan, who is praised by the greatest sages, becomes established. Now, so we had mercy of devotees, we have faith, surrender to Guru, desire to hear, anartha nivritti taking place, and we get to nishtha. Like that. So when we begin devotional service, we have a little bhakti and a lot of anarthas. So the process of anartha nivritti means we do bhakti, and then gradually the anarthas get less and less and less and less, until we reach a stage where we can perform bhakti steadily. The anarthas are not gone completely, and as we do perform bhakti at the nishtha stage, then more anarthas are destroyed. So doesn't mean that anartha nivritti doesn't mean all the anarthas are destroyed, but they're destroyed sufficiently so that one can practice bhakti steadily. And then if the bhakti increases more, and that means consequently the anarthas are much less. So the process of bhakti becomes, let's say, more obvious and stronger. So it reaches a stage of taste or ruchi, and then asakti, very great attachment to the Lord. The mind becomes unaffected by lust, greed, anger, hatred, and illusion, which arise from rajas and tamas. Then the mind becomes fixed in the form of the Lord at the stage of ashakti and becomes satisfied. And then, from that, we go to bhava and prema. Then the mind becomes joyful and satisfied on attaining rati, that is bhava. Finally, prema develops, accompanied by the appearance of complete detachment. The devotee then experiences the Lord's form, qualities, pastimes, powers, and sweetness. So in prema, there is no anartha at all. In bhava, there's a slight anartha, so that's the difference. And then the other stage is even more anartha. So in this chapter, we see the progression of bhakti from faith all the way up to prema. And then finally, in the same chapter, we have Krishna as the final goal. In other scriptures, of course, there will be mention of Krishna also, and in general, all the forms of the Lord are one. Once they are one Bhagavan. But Bhagavatam, its unique feature is to point out Krishna as the ideal form of Bhagavan to worship. So he gets more glorification. So we have statements like this: Vasudeva is the purport of the Vedas, Vasudeva is the object of all sacrifices, yoga, varnashram, knowledge, and austerities are all dependent on Vasudeva, bhakti is dependent on Vasudeva, prema and liberation are dependent on Vasudeva. So Krishna is the center of all the activities that one can do in varnashram and jnana and yoga and whatever. Everything is ultimately should result in realization of Krishna. So then we go to chapter 3. This is where we get one of the answers to the question, who were the avatars? So we get a list of the avatars from Kumaras to Kalki. We can say this is not a complete list, because then we'll find another list in the second canto, and there's a few additions there as well. So this one does not mention Hayagriva, for instance, but then Hayagriva is also an avatar. Some of these avatars are Shaktivesh avatars, jivas, like the Kumaras and Narada Muni, and Kalki, even Kalki. And others are full forms of the Lord. So they are mentioned because, unfortunately, people claim to be avatars. And this list makes sure that they come at a certain time, a certain activity. So you can't just choose a name and say claim to be that person, because there's a certain time when these avatars appear and they have certain activities to go with them. So they're very specific. And after discussing the avatars, then there's the statement is made, actually there's unlimited avatars. And just as the rivers flow, many rivers will flow from an inexhaustible lake, so many avatars will constantly appearing. Which means that in every universe, the Lord comes as avatar, and he does that throughout the day of Brahma, for the whole of Brahma's life, in every universe. So in that sense, it doesn't mean that we got all sorts of new avatars coming up that aren't mentioned, but these avatars which are mentioned are the ones that keep appearing again and again in different universes every day of Brahma. In that sense, they're unlimited. As well as avatars, we get something called the vibhutis, especially empowered living entities, who are also distinct from the Shaktivesh avatars, who have spiritual bodies. So the vibhutis do not have spiritual bodies. Sages, Manus, Devatas, powerful humans, or the sons of Manu, along with Brahma's sons, are also considered to be vibhutis of the Lord. So they're given special powers to carry out certain missions of the Manus or Devatas. Then what about the Vishwarupa, the universal form? So this is considered to be a lesser form. This material realm composed of material gunas and the elements from Mahatattva to earth and with Paramatma as its basis is a material form of the Lord who has a spiritual form of consciousness is devoid of material form. So there is a form of the Lord is spiritual, but this other form of the universe with the elements, etc., that's a material form. So we distinguish the Vishwarupa from all the other forms because it's not a spiritual form. So among all these different forms, including the Vibhutis and the Vishwarupa, etc., then Krishna is singled out among them all. All avatars mentioned and not mentioned here, who are portions of Mahavishnu or empowered jivas, create happiness in the world wherever it is afflicted by demons and their ideas. But Krishna is the ultimate form of Bhagavan. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So though we have all this list of different forms of the Lord, the ultimate form is Krishna. So that one statement is very important because it states the main theme of the Bhagavatam. And all other statements should agree with that statement. If they don't, that means there's some misinterpretation there. So, in other words, everything is pointing towards Krishna as the ultimate form. All the statements in the Bhagavatam should do that. So people say, why only Krishna? Why worship only Krishna? So first we have to answer, because of pramana. What pramana we accept? We accept Bhagavatam. Why do we accept Bhagavatam? Because it's the conclusion of all the other scriptures of the Vedic literatures, etc. And what does Bhagavatam say? Bhagavatam says Krishna is that supreme form. So that's why we follow Krishna. So it's based upon pramana. If people don't accept a pramana, then of course it's difficult to argue anything, because this is a matter of your own opinion or tradition or whatever, which doesn't have a spiritual basis or a scriptural basis at all. So first we have to discuss what the pramana is. Once we get the pramana, then we can say, okay, what does that pramana say? But some pramanas may not be admissible. They may say Shaiva Siddhanta scriptures. We don't accept that as pramana. It's nowhere, even Shankaracharya doesn't accept it. So we have to see what the pramanas are first, then we can choose. So we can only understand the nature of God and the aspects of God, like Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, and then the ultimate form of God also, from Scripture. We can't just base it on like and dislike, personal views. So after discussing the avatars, then we start the story of Vyasadeva. So Vyasadeva is the compiler of the Vedas. He does not write the Vedas. He divides one Veda into 4 Vedas. But he writes the Puranas to complete the Vedas. So Purana can mean Purnayate, to make complete. So to explain the Vedas in an easy way for the people of Kali Yuga, Vedavyas writes the Puranas. And he also wrote the Mahabharata. But it's explained that actually he wasn't satisfied after writing all this. He was sitting there and he felt dissatisfied. And then Narada Muni appeared. Finally. And then chapter 5 discusses all about Narada Muni's instructions. So this is the important instruction. He created a great disturbance by teaching a condemned subject to people attached to material enjoyment in order to make them accept Dharma. Thinking that what you have taught is real Dharma, they do not consider giving it up. So this refers to writing Puranas, in which Vyasadeva caters to the people in Tamagun and Rajagun and Sattvagun, and he writes different things for each one, according to the qualification, which is similar to having Karma Kanda for the people who are attached to material enjoyment, having Gyan Kanda for people who are detached, etc. So he was catering to the people in different gunas, following the example of karma yoga and jnana yoga, etc. But Narada Muni condemns this. If a person, having given up his duties of varna ashram, begins to worship the Lord's lotus feet and happens to deviate or not reach perfection, there is no misfortune for him at all in the future. But what does the person who follows all duties of varna ashram but does not worship the Lord gain? So this is a glorification of the process of bhakti to the Supreme Lord. So Narada Muni, there's a whole story of Narada Muni and how he developed his bhakti. So it goes in 12 stages. He gets the mercy of devotees, and then he serves the devotees, then he develops faith, then he takes shelter of the Guru, and he develops a desire for worshipping the Lord, he performs devotional service, gets an arta niriti, and then goes to Nishta, Ruchi, Sakti, Bhava, and Prema. So those are the 12 stages in the life of Narada Muni. Then, this describes the whole story of Narada Muni, how he served the sages, etc. His mother dies, and then he serves the sages, then he departs after hearing from them, and he's wandering around, etc. And then finally, he has a vision of Supreme Lord, but then the Lord disappears, and then he's very heartbroken, and finally the Lord says, you won't see me again in this lifetime. I want to increase your feeling of separation. And then finally he departs from his body and gets his spiritual body. Yeah? And then he gets born in another kalpa of Brahma, another day of Brahma. So the story takes place from a previous day of Brahma where he was serving the maidservant. So in other words, we get a whole story of his life here. Chapter 7, Vyasadeva, on the instruction of Narada Muni, then begins to, he writes the Bhagavatam. Actually, it's not exactly written, but revised. There is a Bhagavatam there, but then to make it the ultimate conclusion of everything, he revised everything and glorified Krishna, particularly as Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And there's a story of how he taught to Sukadev. Sukadev was considered to be an Atma Rama before his birth. So he stayed 16 years in the womb of his mother because he was completely disinterested in the material world. And of course, it was a big problem for Vyasadeva. He would talk to him, and then Sukadev says, I cannot come out because if I look at the material world, I may fall from my position of being an Atma Rama. It's too much Maya. So he couldn't convince Sukadev to get born. So he stayed inside his mother for 16 years. So Vyasadeva got very worried about this. He was in the Himalayas. So he went to Dwarka, and he talked to Krishna and convinced Krishna to come to talk to Sukadeva in the womb. So Krishna came there, and then he asked Sukadeva, why are you doing this? And then Sukadeva said, I don't want to be overcome by Maya when I get born and see this material world. So then Krishna said, that's no problem. I guarantee, as Supreme Lord, you will not be affected by Maya. So then he had to come out. So he was born. And as soon as he was born, he was completely disinterested in his family members, including his father. So he just walked away. No attachment to Vyasadeva as his father, his mother, anything. He walked away like that. So Vyasadeva was rather upset. And then he thought of a little plan. So through his vision, he could understand where Sukadeva was under a tree. So he told his disciples to go there and find him. And then he said, you recite Bhagavatam. So the disciples went and they found him in samadhi under the tree, absorbed in Brahman, because he was an Atmaram. And they began reciting Bhagavatam. And then Sukadeva, he heard the Bhagavatam, and he got so attracted that he broke his samadhi. So that's what this verse here is stating, the Atmaram verse. This is concerning Sukadeva. Some sages who are Atmaramas, that's Sukadeva, beyond the scriptures, false ego, and rules, also practice unmotivated pure bhakti to the master of pure bhakti, Krishna, since he possesses qualities attractive even to them. So in other words, Krishna is attractive even to the Atmarama. And that, in other words, he was attracted to, Sukadeva was attracted to Krishna in the Bhagavatam. So that's one of the qualities, that the Lord is even attractive to the Atmaramas. So in relation to the story of how Sukadeva met Parikshit, then we have story of Asvatthama killing Draupadi's sleeping sons. And then we get Kunti's prayers, where Asvatthama tries to kill Parikshit also in the womb, and therefore Kunti prays, and then Uttara also begins to pray for protection of Parikshit. And we get Yudhishthira's grief after the war. Chapter 9 is passing of Bhishmadev after, actually during the war. Well, like that. And there was Krishna departing for Dwarka and arriving at Dwarka. And then finally we get in chapter 12 the birth of Parikshit. And 13 further stories of how Dhritarashtra leaves the palace, etc. Yudhishthira begins to see omens because Krishna has departed. And then finally Yudhishthira gives the throne to Parikshit. And then Parikshit hears about Dharma. This is the chapters we're studying now. And Parikshit hears Dharma and earth talking, the bull and the cow talking, etc. And then he punishes Kali in chapter 17. Like that. In relation to that, we have the four legs of Dharma: Socha, Doya, Satya, and Tapa, destroyed by illicit sex, intoxication, animal killing, gambling, etc. These destroy the four legs of Dharma, sinful activities, and these become prominent in Kali Yuga. So, Parikshit prevents Kali Yuga from entering his kingdom, but then Parikshit gets cursed because he puts a snake around the sage because he wanted some water and he was thirsty. So, and the sage was in samadhi, so he didn't listen to him. So then he got angry and put a snake around his neck, and consequently the Brahman's son cursed Parikshit to die in 7 days. This, of course, is explained as the will of the Lord. It wasn't Parikshit's fault ultimately. It was because he was great king and he wouldn't insult a Brahmana and he wouldn't get agitated by thirst. But somehow he did this as the will of the Lord. And then he has to die. And then he begins to gather all the people, the sages, etc. Say, what should I do when I'm dying? And then in chapter 9, Sukadeva arrives. And then he tells them, you have to hear about the Lord. And then he begins speaking Bhagavatam, which starts in the second canto. So in this way, everything leads up to Sukadeva beginning to speak the Bhagavatam. So all these other stories are just related to that, directly or indirectly, to the ultimate speaking of Sukadeva to Parikshit Maharaj. Okay. Any question now?
So, in the Bhagavatam, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday we were talking about even Bhagavatam has little bit of jnana yoga, karma yoga, because
Yeah.
all kind of rishis were present there.
Yeah.
And also we see here Narada is condemning that, saying that why are you talking about all these things?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because we also say Kaitava Dharma is rejected in Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, so what is the purpose behind that?
Yeah, so the main thing is that the scripture should not confuse people. Huh? And therefore, though other topics are raised, in other words, we get actually 10 topics. We can say, well, why not just have the 10th canto? Forget about everything. It's much easier for us, so we don't have to go through 10 cantos. We just get one canto to go through, or 12 cantos, we get one canto. But we have all these other topics here, like Sarga, Visarga, Sthana. Why we have to hear about Mahavishnu glancing over material energy? Why do we have to hear about Varaha lifting up the earth planet? Why don't we just have Krishna lifting over downhill? We got all these other stories of avatars. You got stories of Manus. You got stories about karma yoga and things like this, and yoga and Kapila Dev doing all sorts of things. So, but the idea is that all these are ultimately related to Krishna and the Bhagavatam. Huh? That's how we have to see everything there. Huh? So, like in Bhagavad Gita, we have karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. Ultimately, it's all leading to bhakti and worship of Krishna. So we should see it that way in Bhagavatam also. So, Vasudev and Sukadev give us plenty of hints on how to understand the Bhagavatam. So they make it quite clear. At the same time, certain things are a little bit hidden, as is the case of all scriptures. They hide something a little bit. And in the Bhagavatam also, Krishna tells Uddhava that we prefer parokshavad, indirect speech. So often the meaning is not given directly. It's hidden from unqualified people, whether it's Upanishads or whatever. And why isn't Krishna's name mentioned in the Vedas and all this? It is, but much less frequently. But things are purposely hidden in some cases because they are rare treasures. So of all things, Krishna is the rarest. So therefore, it's more hidden. So therefore, even the Bhagavatam presents Krishna. Krishna's Tu Bhagavan Swayam, very clear statement. But then throughout, we'll get statements which are a little, not so clear sometimes. And this gives opportunity for others to not get the meaning. So, the qualified people will get the truth, and the unqualified people will be bewildered, and they'll get another meaning. So that's why it means prokshavan. Vishnu Chakravarti says the nature of Bhagavatam is to be like Mohini. So Mohini bewildered the demons and gave the nectar to the devatas. So Bhagavatam is like Mohini because it bewilders the demons also, and they get a different meaning from Bhagavatam because certain things are hidden. And the devotees will understand the real meaning by taking the hints of Sukadev and Vyasadeva, etc. They get the real nectar. So it presents two views: one for unqualified people, they can get another meaning; one for the devotees. So the different things like karma and gyan and yoga are discussed in Bhagavatam also. The devotee will understand how they are situated in relation to bhakti. The other people won't. But if we read carefully, then we can understand what the real truth is.
Do we understand the first canto is compiled by Vyasadeva also?
Ultimately, I guess we accept that. It's not, our acharyas don't say, but it's you accept the whole thing. So ultimately, I guess we can say yes. Finally, of course, he is also like I say, sarvagya. He knows everything. So then he can manifest everything.
In the slide it said that Vyasadeva wrote was it the Mahabharata and some other scriptures as well.
Puranas, yeah.
Puranas. I've heard some people say that Ganesh wrote Mahabharata. Could you?
Well, he was like the secretary. Just like Prabhupada wrote a commentary on Bhagavad Gita. I think, well, you had some other people typing it out sometimes like that. And we have editors in BBT doing all the work like this, and I think somebody's recording or somebody's typing it out like that. So Ganesh is like the scribe. Vasudev speaks and he records it all. That's all. So those are written works. Puranas and Mahabharata are written works. So that's distinct from Vedas, which are not actually written. Vasudev didn't write the Vedas. He didn't compose them. They were already there. He just preserved them and gave them to his disciples. Whereas he actually composed the words of Mahabharata and the Puranas. So in that sense, they're non-eternal. So based on that, then, Shankaracharya says the Shruti has more authority. And in the Shruti, the Upanishads are supreme. So therefore, the authority of Upanishad is greater than the Puranas and Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata. So if there's a contradiction, we go back to the Upanishads. And Upanishads, for him, mean impersonal. So therefore, all the personal things that come out in Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, no, it's inferior proof. So it's a lesser proof, so he rejects it.
The reason I ask that is because I've heard some devotees say that, this point that Ganesh wrote, the Mahabharata or the Vedas and stuff, it's not, is it mentioned in Bhagavatam or?
The Ganesh was involved? No.
Yeah.
I think it's in the Mahabharata. But he didn't compose it. Ganesh does not compose it. He just writes it down, that's all. As for who wrote down Bhagavatam, I don't think it's said anywhere. But the students of Vyasadeva knew it because they're the ones that recited it to Sukadev. So they must have known it.
Also, there is a difference in the story of Parikshit Maharaj between Mahabharata and Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile that difference? Because it says the last 7 days he built a
Island, on the island, or like this, or whatever, yeah. In that particular case, our acharyas don't mention that other story. But in other cases, sometimes they quote from, I think, Harivamsa. And it also has a little bit, some details of something are different. So then our acharyas will comment, it's another kalpa. In another day of Brahma, it happens slightly differently, like this, in relation to those stories. So the Lord appears every day of Brahma, and he performs his activities, but the activities may be slightly different. So not just Krishna, but other avatars also, their activities may be slightly different every day of Brahma. There's some variations in their activities. And therefore the Puranas and the Mahabharata, which record these things, also may be slightly different in different days of Brahma, because they did different things. Some activities the same, some a little different.
So, Maharaj, in that case, does Vyasadeva does this dividing of Vedas and writing the Puranas every day of Brahma or every Kali Yuga?
There is a Vyasa who appears every Kali Yuga.
Oh.
Yeah. And because it mentions, I think, in the Vishnu Purana, I think, he gives a whole list of different personalities who take up that role. But, so then they would be writing 1,000 Vedavyasas, writing Puranas. So I guess they record the different events of that particular Yuga cycle also in their Puranas, etc. But obviously, Krishna only appears once in the day of Brahma, so that they don't get to record all of that. But we have the Vyasas there, and our acharyas say that Vyasadeva is actually full Lord. He's not a Shaktavesh avatar. But then in Vishnu Purana mentions that so many different persons take the role Vedavyas and different Kali Yugas or end of Dwapara Yugas. So I think in relation to that is explained that those jivas enter into Vyasadeva, enter his body, participate in his pastimes.
So that relation I've heard from you is, I think if I'm correct, the 10th canto of Bhagavatam doesn't happen in every Gita cycle. Is that correct? The leaders of Krishna and Vrindavan doesn't happen. Only the Dwarakati leaders will be there, and then.
Well, if Krishna doesn't appear, then they won't. Like he only appears once in the day of Brahma, yeah.
Yeah.
In the 28 cycles. So the others he's not there. So then the Puranas wouldn't discuss him. Like the previous, all the way up to now, they're not going to discuss him. So there's no Krishna Bhakti in the Kali Yuga following the Dwapara Yuga in that case. What happens after, I don't know whether they still have Krishna in their mind. But sometimes we find, like in the case of, I think it's in Prahlad, he does mention Krishna in one place. So there's it can be two things. One, it's a recollection of a previous cycle from previous day of Brahma. That's one explanation.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So my question was, you said that a jiva goes into the role of Vyasadeva.
Yeah.
So when we talk about other devotees like Arjuna or Parikshit Maharaj, are they also roles, or is it the same jiva that participates in the pastimes again and again?
Well, like Arjuna and others, they're considered to be Nityasiddha. So they're jivas who eternally have that role. So nobody usually enters into them. It's possible, of course, because we have the case of Nanda and Yasoda, and then it's described how previously, Drona and Dara wanted to have the Lord as their son, so they performed tapasya like this, and then became Nanda and Yasoda. So commentary by our acharyas, like Vishwanath says, actually that doesn't make too much sense because Nanda and Yasoda are eternal. They don't have to do any sadhana to become Nanda and Yasoda. They're eternally like that, and then so they couldn't be Drona and Dara. So he explains that Drona and Dara are expansions of Nanda and Yasoda. And they just set an example of, doing bhakti to attain that, and then they merge when Krishna appears, and they merge back into Nanda and Yasoda again, and they disappear. So we have eternal associates of the Lord called the Nityasiddhas. They're jivas, but they always have that role. Nobody becomes them.
Consider the same thing for Narada Swami Maharaj. Like he comes as a Gandharva, and then he gets cursed, and then after that again he's born as a son to a
maidservant. Yeah, and then he appears.
Is that the case even for Narada Muni?
So actually, he's a Shaktavesh avatar who has eternal spiritual body. So therefore, it's not possible for him to get cursed and get born in one sense. So it's more or less he takes that role to show sadhana bhakti and then progress upwards. But then he gets back into his original role again. And he also is in the spiritual world. So he's like Nityasiddhas or like that.
Right.
Maharaj, related to Narada, in the slide it said that he goes, so the great devotees developed faith, and went through the whole stages of Shraddha, Navratha, Nivritti, all of that.
Yeah.
So it said there, one of the lines said he accepted a guru. Does it say who exactly his guru was?
No, it's just those sages who were staying there in the forest, and they were talking spiritual topics. So a guru, it doesn't necessarily mean a Diksha guru also. It could be Shiksha guru. Yeah. So I pointed out in another place that most of the Vedic statements about surrender to guru and serve guru are actually the Shiksha guru, not the Diksha guru. Because the Diksha guru for the Vedic knowledge is the father, because he gives the mantra. The Brahma Gayatri, so technically he's the Diksha guru for the Vedas. But then they usually study under somebody else. So when it talks about, with firewood in your hands, you go to the guru and then you get the knowledge and all this. It's all Shiksha Guru.
Maharaj, in terms of Dhritarashtra spending the whole of his life, and then only when Vidura comes and then he chastises him, does he have a change of heart at that time, or is it that he realizes only at that point of time? Because there have been so many instances throughout his life that there are so many things that happened in his life that seems to have not bothered him. But what made Dhritarashtra realize at that point of time when Vidura goes and talks to him?
I guess we can say the inconceivable mercy of Vidura. The devotee changed him. Of course, Vidura was in his assembly, and it had no effect previously. Huh?
Yeah.
But now the circumstances had changed because everything was gone. So maybe that experience itself was also the stimulus. He had nothing. He was dependent on the Pandavas, who he hated as enemies. So he was in a very miserable position. So due to that, extreme position, then that was an opportunity for him to change. A completely distressful condition. So that was one thing. The other, of course, is that Vidura came at that time. So, and his mercy was instrumental in getting him to leave the kingdom. So it does show the great compassion of a devotee, because he was completely mistreated by Dhritarashtra. And that's why he had left the palace, because he wouldn't control the son, Duryodhana, who insulted him. But nevertheless, he was Vidura was very compassionate towards him and tried to help him at the last stage. So it looked like it had some effect.
Think about Shukadev Goswami. We know that he spent 16 years in the Navy, come out. How do we explain that exactly? Because after the 16 years, he came out, I assume, in a 16-year-old body. So
how did he sit? Well, not really explained, but even though he was 16 years there and he came out, of course the pictures are there in one form, but maybe he was smaller than that, we don't know. But even then, if he was only like a 5-year-old size, still it would be a little difficult to be in his mother's womb. Not really explained there, but we do see rather fantastic things happening in terms of births, etc., in the Vedas and Puranas sometimes. So how it happens, we don't know, but it's possible. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj ki jai.